Stop whatever you are doing for a second. Look at your hand. Really look at it. The skin, the knuckles, the tiny lines running across your palm. You've looked at that hand your entire life and assumed you knew exactly what it was. You don't, because somewhere inside every single cell of that hand, coiled up in the DNA that makes you, there is genetic code that does not belong to Homo sapiens. It belongs to a different species. A species that we didn't even know existed until a scientist pulled a tiny fragment of bone out of a cave in Siberia and changed everything we thought we knew about what it means to be human. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. That foreign DNA isn't just sitting there doing nothing. Right now, today, it is actively running parts of your biology. Your immune system, your ability to survive at high altitude, possibly your brain. You are not fully human. Nobody is. And we only found out about a decade ago. Let's go back to the cave. Imagine you are a paleoanthropologist, a scientist who studies ancient humans, and it's the year 2008. You've been handed a fragment of bone, not a skull, not a jaw, not a dramatic fossil that gets its own museum display case. A fragment of a finger bone, the tip of a pinky finger, to be specific, found in Denisova cave in the Altai Mountains of Siberia. A place so cold and remote that getting there involved a journey that would make most people immediately reconsider their career choices. The bone is tiny. It's from child. It's somewhere between 30,000 and 50,000 years old. And at first glance, it looks like it could be from a Neanderthal or a modern human, or honestly just about anything. So the scientists do something that nobody had been able to do with ancient bones before. They extract DNA from it. And what they find inside that tiny fragment of a child's pinky finger is so unexpected that they assumed, at first, that something had gone wrong with the equipment. The DNA didn't match Homo sapiens. It didn't match Neanderthals either. It was something else. Something completely new. A ghost species. A human relative that nobody had ever identified, classified, or even suspected existed. They called it Homo Denisova, the Denisovans, named after the cave where the only evidence of their existence was found, which at that point was a finger bone and 2 teeth. That was it. The entire known physical record of an entire human species. 2 teeth and a piece of a pinky finger. Now here's where it gets truly strange. Because the next question the scientists asked was, did the Denisovans ever meet us? Did they ever encounter Homo sapiens, our direct ancestors, out there in the ancient world? And the answer to that question was buried, not in a cave. It was buried in you. When researchers compared the Denisovan genome to the DNA of modern people from around the world, they found something that nobody expected. Denisovan DNA wasn't gone. It hadn't disappeared when the Denisovans disappeared. It was still here, carried forward generation by generation for 50,000 years in the bodies of living people. People in Papua New Guinea carry up to 6% Denisovan DNA. Aboriginal Australians carry similar amounts. Populations across the Southeast Asia, the Pacific Islands, and parts of East Asia all carry Denisovan genetic sequences in their genomes. Right now, in living, breathing people, which means something extraordinary happened a very long time ago. Our ancestors met the Denisovans, and they didn't just meet them the way you meet someone at a party and forget about them the next morning. They had children together. Those children had children, and those children had children. And somewhere down that 50,000-year chain of generations is you, sitting here, carrying a piece of a species we've known about for roughly 15 years. But this wasn't even the biggest surprise, because scientists then started asking a different question. If Denisovan DNA has been carried through 50,000 years of human reproduction, it must be doing something useful. Random genetic passengers that are harmful or useless get filtered out by natural selection over thousands of generations. The fact that Denisovan sequences survived means they were worth keeping. So what are they doing? The answer is one of the most counterintuitive discoveries in modern genetics. Denisovan DNA is protecting you. The most well-documented example involves a gene called EPS1. This gene regulates how the body responds to low oxygen levels, how efficiently you use the thin air at high altitude. In most people, exposure to high altitude causes the blood to thicken dangerously as the body overproduces red blood cells to compensate for the lower oxygen. It's a clumsy, problematic response that causes altitude sickness, blood clots, and in extreme cases, death. But Tibetan people living above 4,000 meters, one of the highest inhabited regions on Earth, don't have this problem. Their bodies handle high altitude with a completely different, far more elegant biological response. For years, scientists couldn't figure out why. Then they sequenced the Tibetan genome and found it. The EPS1 variant that makes Tibetan people thrive at altitude is Denisovan. Not human, Denisovan. It arrived in the Homo sapiens gene pool through interbreeding, and it was so dramatically superior for high-altitude survival that natural selection preserved it completely while filtering out almost all other Denisovan sequences in those populations. The Denisovans, it appears, had already figured out how to live on top of the world. And they passed that knowledge not through language, not through tools, but through their DNA, directly into the cells of their descendants who are still using it today. And here's the part nobody talks about. The Denisovans are not the only ghost species living inside us. Because almost simultaneously with the Denisovan discovery, researchers confirmed something that had been debated for decades about Neanderthals. Everyone outside sub-Saharan Africa carries somewhere between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA. That means if you are of European, Asian, Native American, or Middle Eastern ancestry, you're a part Neanderthal. Right now, measurably, every person of East Asian ancestry carries slightly more Neanderthal DNA than Europeans. And some populations appear to carry both Neanderthal and Denisovan sequences simultaneously. You are, depending on your ancestry, a mosaic of at least 2 and possibly 3 separate human species. And that's only what we've found so far. Because, and this is the genuinely unsettling part, genetic analysis has identified segments in modern human DNA that don't match any known ancient species. Not Homo sapiens, not Neanderthal, not Denisovan. There appears to be at least one more ghost species out there. A human relative that interbred with our ancestors, left DNA in modern humans, and has yet to leave behind a single bone that we've found. We are carrying the genetic legacy of a species we cannot identify, that we have no physical evidence of, that exists, to us, only as a signature in someone's genome. Things get even stranger when you ask what all this inherited DNA is actually doing in our bodies. Neanderthal DNA sequences have been linked to immune system function, the ability to recognize and fight pathogens that Homo sapiens had never encountered before. When our ancestors moved into Europe and Asia, territories the Neanderthals had occupied for hundreds of thousands of years, they encountered an entirely new landscape of bacteria, viruses, and parasites. Neanderthals have been fighting those pathogens for millennia and had evolved immune responses to them. By absorbing Neanderthal DNA, arriving Homo sapiens inherited those immune responses ready-made. We survived European winters partly because Neanderthals taught our immune systems how, encoded in their DNA, passed through their children. But Neanderthal DNA doesn't only help us. Some sequences that arrived through interbreeding have been linked to increased risk of depression, blood clotting disorders, and certain autoimmune conditions. The ancient immune genes that once protected Neanderthals from cave-era pathogens sometimes misfire in a modern environment, recognizing threats that no longer exist and mounting inflammatory responses to nothing. The real reason some people struggle with certain immune disorders may not be a mutation. It may be inheritance from a species that has been extinct for 30,000 years, still trying to fight a world that no longer exists. Your ancient DNA doesn't always know what century it's in. That turns out to be relevant more often than anyone expected. Here's what modern people get almost completely wrong about all of this. We tend to think of human evolution as a clean, linear story. One species leads to another, leads to another, leads to us, standing at the top of the ladder, the final product, the finished version. A tidy family tree with a single trunk. That's not what happened. What actually happened was messier, stranger, and more interesting than that. For hundreds of thousands of years, multiple human species, not just us, were walking the earth simultaneously. Homo sapiens in Africa, Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, Denisovans across Central and Eastern Asia, the mysterious ghost species, wherever they were, and probably others we haven't found yet. All of them alive at the same time. All of them capable, to varying degrees, of interbreeding when they met. Human evolution wasn't a ladder. It was a web. And the modern human genome is the result of that web. A layered, complex, multi-species document recording tens of thousands of years of contact, migration, and reproduction across the ancient world. When scientists say you have Denisovan DNA, they're not saying you had one ancestor who was a Denisovan. They're saying that somewhere in your family tree, across possibly hundreds of generations of gradual genetic mixing, fragments of Denisovan sequence were preserved because they were useful. You are the end result of a blending that nobody planned, nobody understood, and that happened in silence over thousands of years. And now we arrive at the question that nobody has a good answer to. If our ancestors were living alongside Denisovans, meeting them, having children with them, what was that like? What did they think of each other? Were the Denisovans similar enough to communicate with? Similar enough to form relationships with? Or was the encounter something stranger and more ambiguous than that? We don't know. We have a finger bone, 2 teeth, and a genome. The Denisovans left no art that we've found, no tools we could definitively attribute to them, no cave paintings, no burials. They existed, they met us, they changed us, and then they vanished, leaving almost nothing behind except the DNA that is sitting in the cells of millions of living people right now. Whatever the Denisovans were, whatever they thought and felt and knew, the only part of them that survived is the part that became us. So here's what you take away from all of this. The next time someone tries to divide humanity into groups based on where people come from, or what they look like, or what their ancestry contains, remember this. Every single person on this planet is already a hybrid, a mixture, a layered archive of species that no longer exist, preserved in the only medium that could survive 50,000 years without degrading. You're not the end of a line. You are a carrier, a library. You are walking around with genetic chapters written by species that had already lived and died before our ancestors finished migrating out of Africa. And the most extraordinary part of all of this, the thing that I keep coming back to, is the finger bone. A child, 30 to 50,000 years ago, in a cave in Siberia, in the cold, in a world we can barely imagine. That child lived a short life and left almost nothing behind. No name, no face, no story we can tell. Just a fragment of a finger sitting in a cave for 50 millennia waiting to be found. And when we found it, when we finally looked inside it properly, we discovered that the child wasn't gone at all. Not entirely. Some small, stubborn, encoded piece of them had been walking the world this whole time. In people who never knew it. In people who had no idea they were carrying something ancient and irreplaceable inside them. That child's DNA is still out here. In living people. Right now. Today. Look at your hand again. You've been carrying ancient strangers your whole life. You just didn't know their name.